Hello and welcome to a very special edition here on CNBC TV 18. I'm your host, Ronojoy Banerjee. This is a company that has its genesis in Czech Republic, but if you ask an average Indian, most of them would be surprised because most Indians here would think that Bata is an Indian brand. That is the power of brand Bata, but it's a brand that is now in a state of rediscovering itself. To talk more about that, I'm delighted now to be joined by my guest, Mr. Thomas Archer Bata, the Chief Marketing Officer globally.
Great to be here.
Great to have you on our show. Thanks very much. So for most Indians, Bata is actually an Indian brand. So that, many would say is remarkable. But at the same time, you're now trying to rediscover the brand. Why do you want to do it? Many would wonder, just leave it as it is.
Well, I think, for us, Bata in many ways is an Indian brand. At least it has an Indian soul because it's been here for so long. It's been part of the culture. Countless generations have grown up wearing school shoes, father, son, visiting the stores together. So, why do we want to change the image? It's because as, the world becomes more globalized, it's really necessary, for us to be on top of the trends.
Right.
And if you like it or not, the perception is that an international brand is a little bit more aspirational than a local brand.
Yeah.
So we don't want to lose our closeness to the market.
So has suddenly your biggest strength become your source of weakness? Your biggest strength was Bata, Indian brand, sense of familiarity. Is that now has that now become your Achilles heel, and all puns intended here?
Yes, I think, to an extent, the tradition does help us.
Okay.
It means that, we are relevant, we're trusted. But it's hard to be cool when you're a traditional brand, right? So our challenge is to bring a little bit of coolness to our tradition and appeal to a younger generation.
Yeah, so your biggest challenge then, Thomas, would be the fact that, I have worn Bata, my parents may have worn Bata, but the challenge is, will my kids wear Bata? That's the big challenge that Bata is now grappling with.
Absolutely. It's how do we get your kids, to come, 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, and then, just the whole kind of transitional generation.
So right? How are you doing that?
So what are we doing? Well, first of all, we're starting off with product. We have to have the right products. So we've taken an approach whereby we actually really understand the consumers, understand what they're looking for, and then we bring those products as quickly as possible to market. So we introduced lots of new collections and our power brands, North Star brands, Bata brands, which are a little bit more relevant to a younger consumer. And second of all is cool, engaging marketing that they can actually see. What I always hear from Indian consumers is, oh, I haven't seen Bata marketing in years. So that's something we're trying to change now.
So because would you also look at the option then of, you're telling me that you're trying to reintroduce different kinds of brands. Would they always, would I find those brands always under the Bata showroom, or is there even a possibility for you, gauging the response some of the brands get, to actually spin them off as a separate brand identity and perhaps separate stores for them? Is that something that you're open to?
Absolutely, and it's actually something we're doing at the moment. Let's say, for example, Power. Power is a brand that we've completely rejuvenated over the last year and a half. Now we've signed up the vice captain of the Indian women's cricket team, Smriti Mandhana, and she's basically helping us launch some of our more premium lines. So now we're bringing, much more colorful, technological lines to the brand, slightly higher price point, but extremely good value still. We opened our first Power store a few weeks ago here in Noida, and so we intend to spin that off, really create a strong athletic brand in its own right. And then we're looking at other brands like North Star, like Bubble Gummers, each catering to a slightly different segment.
Well, that will be a complete overhauling of your branding strategy that you followed since, what, 1932?
That's correct.
My God, so it's a complete overhaul of the branding strategy. If you're telling me that each of these brands could potentially then have their own distribution network, then it's like completely changing the way you've done business.
It's a big change, but we believe that, well, you have, let's say, the father company, Bata, overall, guaranteeing, that trust, that quality, that people have been used to. Each one of the brands has to take its own life at some point. They have to build their own story and their own association with the consumer.
So currently you're telling me it's only brand Power which has its own sort of distinct identity outside of the Bata retail? Well,
we've always had Hush Puppies.
Hush Puppies
has been probably the first one we did. But in terms of appealing to the youth segment, Power is going to be, let's say, the first big play we're making.
And then how many more brands will sort of follow what you're doing with Power?
Well, we think, the youth segment in general is interesting. So Bubble Gummers is a concept we're looking very seriously at. Bubble Gummers is this brand here, exactly. Because as consumers join the middle class, as they care more about, let's say, child health, safety, we think, the kids premium market is going to grow exponentially.
Okay.
And I think we're already seeing signs of that.
Right, right. Because today, even though the brand is so ubiquitous across the country, would you have, because I was trying to dig up what your market share would be, and I'm also trying to figure out how do you compare Bata's market share, because you produce all kinds of shoes. But is there some number or something that you can share with me? Where does it stand right now?
Well, what we know is that we are definitely the largest footwear company in India. Unfortunately, market data is a little bit difficult to come by because you have still a strong informal sector, formal sector. But if you look at us, we're twice the size of our closest competitor. Yeah, I think we still have huge potential. If you look at the, let's say, brand recognition compared to the volume that we sell today. So I think, All White, we're market leaders in the sports category. Actually, Power is the largest sports brand in India. It's not necessarily recognized as such, so that's something we'll be working on growing further.
So currently, you're producing about between 55 and 60 million pairs of shoes.
Correct.
All right. So how do you see this? The quarter that has just gone by. How do you see you finishing financial year 2017, 2018?
Yeah. Well, I think 2017 was a good year. We had great bottom line growth, we had good top line growth. This year, our challenge is to accelerate top line growth. I think last few years we've been delivering great profit, exceeding expectations. This year, with all these new initiatives coming online, we'd be disappointed if we didn't get into the double digits, turnover growth.
Double digits is what you're anticipating this year, because earlier you've said that a $1 billion revenue is what you're targeting. You're still you have to double that from where you are. That's perhaps even more than that. So can you give us a timeline then? Finally, when do we see that happening?
Yeah, well, I think realistically, if we get we expect to get in the double digits this year and then maintain that. So at that rate, we're looking at a 4 to 5 year time frame. I think when we look
4 or 5.
4 to 5 years, yeah. And it depends a little bit on how quickly we can ramp up some of our initiatives. So we have initiatives like Power I was mentioning. We've identified the sports athletic market in India as a huge opportunity, relatively uncompetitive compared to other countries, especially in the segment that we're looking at, which is, let's say, the mass market, mid-price. So we think Power can play a huge role in accelerating our growth, as well as expansion to smaller cities. Another thing that we've identified is that there are over 450 cities in India with 100,000 people where we don't actually have a presence, right? Okay. So those are towns where we started to dabble a little bit and started to open usually franchise stores. The results have been very, very interesting. So that's something that we, low-hanging fruit we see.
All right. So in the big cities, it's not. These are stores that Bata directly operates.
Correct.
But in the smaller cities, you're adopting a more franchise-led model.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Since you mentioned you want, that you expect to end this financial year on a low double-digit kind of growth, and you'd be disappointed if you didn't. So far, what? So far, this, in the first 3 quarters, your overall revenues have grown, I think, by about 6.5%, 7%. Yeah. So that means you're expecting a substantially good fourth quarter.
Yeah. No, we're expecting actually this quarter and the next quarter to be even better because, like I mentioned, many of our initiatives that were launched last year and announced this year are just coming into force now, right? Because there's a bit of a lag time. So products like the Red Label collection, which I'll show you later, we believe have huge potential in terms of revenue growth. Power the same, and we're going to be aggressively marketing, announcing some new collaborations, new brand ambassador actually in the next few days.
Okay, who would that be?
Kriti Sanon. So we're working with her to really launch this Red Label, appeals to a younger demographic. All right.
Then talk to me a little bit about the store format, the Red Label format. I think you started this in Italy and now you've come. So, tell me a little more about this. How is this different from what Bata is already doing here?
So this is a new format that was developed about 6 months ago in Italy. And the concept behind this format is to make, the product king. Right? We've incorporated red and white as the primary brand colors, so to give it a much more identity than our previous concepts. Fresh, new look, very modern, very easy to shop, where service becomes really the essential factor in the shopping experience. So product, service, and I think if you look at it, it's a very agreeable, very attractive, very different perhaps than what people were used to in the past.